was at a bar, and the guy I was with asked me if I'd heard about the new gay cancer. And at that time, I think it was being referred to as GRID, gay-related immune disorder. And I was intrigued because I couldn't understand how a cancer would know if somebody was gay. It didn't become real to me for a number of years. I always tell people, when I was 29, I didn't know anybody who was HIV positive. By the time I was 30, 6 of my friends were dead.
So when I heard about the cure on the news and that it was its second, it brought a lot of sadness to my heart because of so many people we lost. I personally lost a partner, and I've lost my father, along with so many, many, many friends.
I was actually doing some of the original research on the testing for HIV. So then when this became this unnamed disease where people were dying faster than they were, even barely getting diagnosed, it got my attention. It was diagnosed more by its symptoms and what it wasn't than having a definitive test until I believe it was 1987, I think.
Flashing on certain memories, I had one friend who had lived with my partner and I for a couple of years. All of a sudden he was really, really sick, and it had not come home to me as much for anybody else as it did with him because he had been living with us. And then he went into the hospital basically and never came out. And I remember being in the hospital room with his parents and watching his mother, who was sitting next to him in the hospital bed with her arm around him, stroking his hair, wearing rubber gloves and a mask. And my first thought, because I had already started to enter into my kind of more radical period, was how offended I was that she wouldn't touch her child with her own hands, and how all of that approach to it just reinforced the sort of, I don't want to catch it from you kind of stigma that was attached to it. And then very quickly, I was like, what must it feel like for a mother to have been so warned that she actually could not physically touch her child? It forced a solidarity that had not existed before, because all of us, regardless of where we were on the demographic scale, were universally hated by the same people to the same degree. And you got this overwhelming sense that there was a plague that was attacking people like you, and society was rooting for the plague because the political superstructure at the time was arrayed against us. Public opinion was arrayed against us. Certainly the churches were all arrayed against us. We could not raise money to do anything. I remember what was the big thing they did to raise money for the drought in Ethiopia or something like that?
Big concert.
Yeah, the big concert. And all I could think of was, who will ever raise money for us?
Well, I'll tell you, I worked for the Cook County Department of Public Health at one point, and I ran the HIV and STD programs. And I was over that program when Magic Johnson announced that he was HIV positive. That was so striking, but how it took a celebrity, several celebrities actually, that went public to really get the rest of the public's attention. That's what it takes, I am sorry to say. So it wasn't until then, because, Rock Hudson and then Magic Johnson, that really did more for raising the awareness at that time than anything we had really done to the point. But it helped in the sense of being able to make other people aware.
I'm hoping, even through PrEP, the New Hopes, New Drugs, I think it's bringing more awareness. But I also think, all our prevention messages have failed when you think that as we test here every single day, and we have new diagnoses of 18-year-old individuals, And that saddens me that 18 years old, someone is diagnosed today, 30 years later.
The first time I was talking about one person who happened to become an AIDS activist, and I was talking about it in a very matter-of-fact tone, and the advisor that was with the student group leaned in and whispered in my ear, "Could you explain to them what AIDS is?" And I went, "Pardon me?" And she goes, "Well, many of them are aware that it's a really bad STD, but there was absolutely no understanding of what the community had done to build everything that these kids took for granted so seamlessly that they didn't have to know about it." But to me, from a history perspective, it was almost like a form of child abuse to take kids who grow up as it is without ever having any historically significant positive role models of people like them to refer to and be inspired by, to not know the most important story. I mean, in many ways, next to the civil rights movement in World War II, AIDS was probably the most transformational social thing that happened in the 20th century, because we wouldn't have marriage equality today if it wasn't for AIDS. None of the things that we take for granted today would have happened if AIDS had not ultimately forced an entire generation of gay men out of the closet.